Hello. Since I can't be with you guys today, I'm going to read from Beowulf so that you can understand it and we don't get behind. So we left off on line 1397, and Beowulf had just told Hrothgar that he would willingly go to defeat Grendel's mother if he would just lead the way. And he tells him it's better to seek revenge than to sit around crying about it, essentially. So that is essentially what they're going to do, is they are going to go seek out Grendel's mother, who has taken, remember, Hrothgar's best friend and advisor, Ashir is his name. Okay. So 1397. With that, the old lord, that's Hrothgar, sprang to his feet and praised God for Beowulf's pledge. Then a bit and halter were brought for his horse with the plaited mane. The wise king mounted the royal saddle and rode out in style with a force of shield bearers. The forest paths were marked all over with the monster's tracks, her trail on the ground wherever she had gone across the dark moors, dragging away the body of that thane, Hrothgar's best counselor and overseer of the country. So the noble prince proceeded undismayed up fells and screes, along narrow footpaths and ways where they were forced into single file, ledges on cliffs above lairs of water monsters. He went in front with a few men, good judges of the lie of the land, and suddenly discovered the dismal wood, mountain trees growing out at an angle above gray stones. The bloodshot water surged underneath. It was a sore blow to all of the Danes, friends of the Shieldings, a hurt to each and every one of that noble company when they came upon Ashir's head at the foot of the cliff. So they know they're in the right place. Remember, I told you that Grendel and his mother lived under the mare or a sea, that nothing would even go into that body of water. Continuing on, everybody gazed as the hot gore kept wallowing up, and an urgent war horn repeated its notes. The whole party sat down to watch. The water was infested with all kinds of reptiles. There were writhing sea dragons and monsters slouching on slopes by the cliff. Serpents and wild things such as those that often surface at dawn to roam the sail road and doom the voyage. Down they plunged, lashing in anger at the loud call of the battle bugle. An arrow from the bow of the Geat chief got one of them as he surged to the surface. The seasoned shaft stuck deep in his flank, and his freedom in the water got less and less. It was his last swim. He was swiftly overwhelmed in the shallows, prodded by barbed boar spears, cornered, beaten, pulled up on the bank, a strange lake birth, a loathsome catch men gazed at in awe. Beowulf got ready, donned his war gear, indifferent to death. His mighty, hand-forged, fine-webbed mail would soon meet with the menace underwater. It would keep the bone cage of his body safe. So his, main part of his body is torso. No enemy's clasp could crush him in it. No vicious armlock choke his life out. To guard his head, he had a glittering helmet that was due to be muddied on the mare bottom and blurred in the upswirl. It was of beaten gold, princely headgear hooped and hasped by a weaponsmith who had worked wonders in days gone by and adorned it with boar shapes. Since then, it had resisted every sword. And another item lent by Unferth, remember Unferth is the one that challenged him, saying, oh, didn't you lose the match with Brecca? But another item was lent by Unferth at that moment of need and was of no small importance. The Brehon handed him a hilted weapon, a rare and ancient sword named Hrunting. The iron blade with its ill-boding patterns had been tempered in blood. It had never failed the hand of anyone who hefted it in battle, anyone who had fought and faced the worst in the gap of danger. This was not the first time it had been called on to perform heroic feats. When he lent that blade to the better swordsman, Unferth, the strong-built son of Edgeloff, could hardly have remembered the ranting speech he had made in his cups when he challenged Beowulf. He was not man enough to face the turmoil of a fight underwater and the risk to his life. So there he lost fame and repute. It was different for the other, rigged out in his gear, ready to do battle, which would be Beowulf. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Wisest of kings, now that I have come to the point of action, I ask you to recall what we said earlier, that you, son of Halfdane, and gold friend to retainers, that you, if I should fall and suffer death while serving your cause, would act like a father toward me afterwards. If this combat kills me, take care of my young company, my comrades in arms, and be sure also, my beloved Hrothgar, to send Helok the treasures I received. Let the Lord of the Geats gaze on that gold. Let Hrethel's son take note of it and see that I found a rare giver of rare magnificence and enjoyed the good of his generosity. And Unferth is to have what I inherited. To that far-famed man I bequeath my own sharp-honed, wave-sheened wonder blade. With Hrunting I shall gain glory or die. Okay, so asking Hrothgar here, saying, if I don't make it, then please send everything that you gave me as gifts for killing Grendel, send it to my king, Helok, back in Sweden, or Geatland. And he says that he would like for Unferth to have back his sword if it fails him. After these words, the prince of the Weather Geats was impatient to be away and plunged suddenly. Without more ado, he dived into the heaving depths of the lake. It was the best part of a day before he could see the solid bottom. Okay, now I don't know about you, but I cannot swim for a better part of the day underwater without needing to breathe. So this is obviously something that's a superhuman characteristic of Beowulf, that he can survive underwater for that long without needing to come up and breathe. Quickly, the one who haunted those waters, who had scavenged and gone her gluttonous rounds for 100 seasons, sensed a human observing her outlandish lair from above. They're talking about Grendel's mother right now. So she lunged and clutched and managed to catch him in her brutal grip. But his body, for all that, remained unscathed. The mesh of the chainmail saved him on the outside. Her savage talons failed to rip the web of his war shirt. Then, once she touched bottom, that wolfish swimmer carried the ring-mailed prince to her court, so that for all his courage he could never use the weapons he carried. And a bewildering horde came at him from the depths, droves of sea beasts who attacked with tusks and tore at his chainmail in a ghastly onslaught. The gallant man could see he had entered some hellish turnhole, and yet the water did not work against him because the hull roofing held off the force of the current. Then he saw firelight, a gleam and flare-up, a glimmer of brightness. So she grabs him and she brings him down into the lair. All the while, these other beasts are trying to get at him. And then when he gets down to where her lair is, he realizes that he can breathe, because there's some kind of a magical spell. They're at the bottom of this sea, this mare, but there's like some kind of a magical spell that keeps a roof. You're some kind of an invisible roof that keeps the water from coming into her lair, so you can actually breathe in this place underwater. The hero observed that swamp thing from hell, Grendel's mother, the Tarn hag in all her terrible strength, then heaved his war sword and swung his arm. The decorated blade came down ringing and singing on her head. But he soon found his battle torch extinguished. The shining blade refused to bite. It spared her and failed the man in his need. It had gone through many hand-to-hand fights, had hewed the armor and helmets of the doomed, but here at last the fabulous powers of that heirloom failed. This is the sword Hrunting that Unferth gives him that has never failed before, but it's failing him now. It doesn't work on Grendel's mother. Helok's kinsman, that's Beowulf, kept thinking about his name and fame. He never lost heart. Then, in a fury, he flung his sword away. The keen, inlaid, worm-looped patterned steel was hurled to the ground. He would have to rely on the might of his arm. So must a man do who intends to gain enduring glory in a combat. Life doesn't cost him a thought. Then the prince of the war geats, Beowulf, warming to this fight with Grendel's mother, gripped her shoulder and laid about him in a battle frenzy. He pitched his killer opponent to the floor, but she rose quickly and retaliated, grappled him tightly in her grim embrace. The sure-footed fighter felt undaunted. The strongest of warriors stumbled and fell. So she pounced upon him and pulled out a broad, whetted knife. Whetted means sharpened. Now she would avenge her only child. She's got the better of him right now. But the mesh of the chainmail on Beowulf's shoulder shielded his life, turned the edge and tip of the blade. The son of Ecgtheow would have surely perished, and the Geats lost their warrior under the wide earth, had the strong links and locks of his war gear not helped to save him. Holy God decided the victory. It was easy for the Lord, the ruler of heaven, to redress the balance once Beowulf got back up onto his feet. Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword in her armory, an ancient heirloom from the days of the giants, an ideal weapon, one that any warrior would envy. But so huge and heavy of itself, only Beowulf could wield it in battle. So the shielding's hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc, a resolute blow that bit deep into her neck bone and severed it entirely, toppling the doomed house of her flesh. She fell to the floor. The sword dripped blood. The swordsman was elated. Now, his own sword, which has never failed, I guess unfirst, because that's who he got it from, had never failed and before, didn't work. But this sword, which is from her own armory and is so huge it was made by giants for giants, is able to kill her. And, remember that Grendel, no blade could kill him either because he had some kind of a magical spell over it. But this blade is one not made by human hands. It's not a man-made blade. It's made by giants. So therefore, it is able to kill her. A light appeared, and the place brightened the way the sky does when heaven's candle is shining clearly. He inspected the vault. With sword held high, its hilt raised to guard and threaten, Helot's Thane scouted by the wall in Grendel's wake. Now the weapon was to prove its worth. The warrior determined to take revenge for every gross act Grendel had committed, and not only for that one occasion when he'd come to slaughter the sleeping troops. 15 of Hrothgar's house guards surprised on their benches and ruthlessly devoured, and as many again carried away, a brutal plunder. Beowulf in his fury now settled that score. He saw the monster in his resting place, talking about Grendel. He sees Grendel lying there, war-weary and wrecked, a lifeless corpse, a casualty in the battle of Heorot. The body gaped at the stroke dealt to it after death. Beowulf cut the corpse's head off. He's talking about Grendel here. Immediately, the counselors, keeping a lookout with Hrothgar, watching the lake water. So now we're back up to the top. Beowulf has dived deep into this mare, and the people are still waiting back up at the top. So these people watching the wake water, they saw a heave up and a surge of waves and blood in the backwash. They bowed gray heads, spoke in their sage, experienced way about the good warrior, how they never again expected to see that prince returning in triumph to their king. It was clear to many that the wolf of the deep had destroyed him forever. So they see all of this blood and upheaval of waves coming up, now that he's killed Grendel's mother, but they assume that it's Beowulf's blood. They assume that Beowulf is the one that didn't survive. So they're very sad about this, obviously. The 9th hour of the day arrived. The brave Shieldings, that's the Danes, abandoned the cliff top, and the king went home. But sick at heart, staring at the mare, the strangers held on. They wished without hope to behold their lord, Beowulf himself. So while the Danes, assuming that Beowulf is dead, go home, and Hrothgar goes home too, Beowulf's warriors, the 14 warriors he brought with him, they stay in the hopes that Beowulf will still come out. Meanwhile, back down at the bottom of the mare, the sword began to wilt in gory icicles, to slather and thaw. It was a wonderful thing, the way it melted as ice melts when the Father eases the fetters off the frost and unravels the water ropes. He who wields power over time and tide, he is the true Lord. Gotta love those monks for sticking that stuff in there. So this sword that he used to chop off Grendel's head now, he kills Grendel's mother, he chops off Grendel's head. The blood from Grendel, and I guess Grendel's mother too, literally causes the blade to melt. So all he'll have left is the hilt, where you hold the sword. The Geat captain saw treasure in abundance, but carried no spoils from those quarters, except for the head and the inlaid hilt embossed with jewels. Its blade had melted and the scrollwork on it burnt. So scalding was the blood of the poisonous fiend who had perished there. Then away he swam, the one who had survived the fall of his enemies, flailing to the surface. So there's lots of treasure in Grendel's mother's lair, but he doesn't take any of it. All he takes is Grendel's head and the hilt of the sword, which the blade had just melted off of. So he's heading to the surface. The wide water, the waves and pools were no longer infested once the wandering fiend let go of her life in this unreliable world. So it's going to be a lot easier for him to get back through this water because once Grendel's mother's dead, all of the sea monsters in this mare are gone. The seafarer's leader, Beowulf, made for land, resolutely swimming, delighted with his prize, the mighty load he was lugging to the surface. His thanes advanced in a troop to meet him, thanking God and taking great delight in seeing their prince back safe and sound. Quickly the hero's helmet and mail shirt were loosed and unlaced. The lake settled, clouds darkened above the bloodshot depths. With high hearts they headed away along footpaths and trails through the fields, roads that they knew, each of them wrestling with the head they were carrying from the lakeside cliff. Men kingly in their courage and capable of difficult work. It was a task for 4 to hoist Grendel's head on a spear and bear it under strain to the bright hall. So this is interesting. Beowulf is able to bring Grendel's head all the way up from the bottom of the mare, through the water, up to the top, up to the surface, but it takes 4 men to carry it on a spear to take it back to Harrowit. But soon enough, they neared the place, 14 Geats in fine fettle, striding across the outlying ground in a delighted throng around their leader. In he came then, the Thane's commander, the arch-warrior, to address Hrothgar. His courage was proven, his glory was secure. Grendel's head was hauled by the hair, dragged across the floor where the people were drinking, a horror for both queen and company to behold. They stared in awe. It was an astonishing sight. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. So, son of Halfdane, prince of the Shieldings, we are glad to bring this booty from the lake. It is a token of triumph, and we tender it to you. I barely survived the battle underwater. It was hard fought, a desperate affair that could have gone badly. If God had not helped me, the outcome would have been quick and fatal. Now remember, these people believe in fate, not God. Although Hrunting is hard-edged, I could never bring it to bear in battle. It didn't work for me, this sword. But the Lord of Men allowed me to behold, for he often helps the unbefriended, an ancient sword shining on the wall, a weapon made for giants, there for the wielding. Then my moment came in the combat, and I struck the dwellers in that den. Next, the damascened sword blade melted. It bloated and it burned in their rushing blood. I have wrested the hilt from the enemy's hands, avenged the evil done to the Danes. It is what was due. And this I pledge, O Prince of the Shieldings, you can sleep secure with your company of troops in Harrowit Hall. Never need you fear for a single thane of your sept or nation, young warriors or old, that laying waste of life that you and your people endured of yore. So I have saved you. Then the gold hilt was handed over to the old lord, a relic from long ago for the venerable ruler. That rare smithwork was passed on to the prince of the Danes when those devils perished. Once death removed that murdering, guilt-steeped, God-cursed fiend, eliminating his unholy life and his mother's as well, it was willed to that king, who of all lavish gift lords of the north was the best regarded between the two seas. Now I'm going to skip down to right before 1700, 2 lines before it. So Hrothgar has been given the hilt, and the head of Grendel has been dragged in. Then everyone hushed as the son of Halfdane spoke his wisdom. I'm at line 1700. This is Hrothgar speaking. A protector of his people, pledged to uphold truth and justice and to respect tradition, is entitled to affirm that this man was born to distinction. Beowulf, my friend, your fame has gone far and wide. You are known everywhere. In all things you are even-tempered, prudent, which means wise, and resolute, which means determined to achieve something. So I stand firm by the promise of friendship we exchanged before. Forever you will be your people's mainstay and your own warrior's helping hand. Heremod was different. So now he's talking about a different king or a different hero. The way he behaved to Edgewalla's sons, his rise in the world brought little joy to the Danish people, only death and destruction. He vented his rage on men he caroused with, killed his own comrades. A pariah king who cut himself off from his own kind. Pariah means that you are outcast. So because so this is a king of the Danes, a prior king of the Danes, I guess, who didn't treat people right. He brought only death and destruction. And then, so he was cut off from his own kind, even though Almighty God had made him eminent and powerful and marked him from the start for a happy life. But a change happened. He grew bloodthirsty, gave no more rings to honor the Danes. He suffered in the end for having plagued his people for so long. His life lost happiness. So, learn from this and understand true values. I who tell you have wintered into wisdom. So he's using this old king Heremod as an example, not to do the things that he does, which is basically turn on his people and let power get to his head, essentially. So he says, learn from this. And when he says, I who tell you have wintered into wisdom, wintered means he's spent many years, he's become wise from his many years of experience. Now he's got a lesson that he wants to teach Beowulf here. It is a great wonder how Almighty God in his magnificence favors our race with rank and scope and the gift of wisdom. His sway is wide. Sometimes he allows the mind of a man of distinguished birth to follow its bent, grants him fulfillment and felicity on earth, and forts to command in his own country. He permits him to lord it in many lands, until the man in his unthinkingness forgets that it will ever end for him. He indulges his desires. Illness and old age mean nothing to him. His mind is untroubled by envy or malice or the thought of enemies with their hate-honed swords. The whole world conforms to his will. He is kept from the worst until an element of overweening enters him and takes hold, while the soul's guard, its sentry, drowses, grown too distracted. A killer stalks him, an archer who draws a deadly bow. And then the man is hit in the heart. The arrow flies beneath his defenses. The devious promptings of the demon start. His old possessions seem paltry to him now. He covets, meaning he envies. He resents, dishonors custom, and bestows no gold. And because of good things that the heavenly powers gave him in the past, he ignores the shape of things to come. Then finally the end arrives when the body he was lent collapses and falls prey to its death. Ancestral possessions and the goods he hoarded are inherited by another who lets them go with a liberal hand. O flower of warriors, Beowulf, beware of that trap. Choose, dear Beowulf, the better part, eternal rewards. Do not give way to pride. For a brief while your strength is in bloom, but it fades quickly, and soon there will follow illness or the sword to lay you low, or a sudden fire or surge of water, or jabbing blade or javelin from the air, or repellent age. Your piercing eye will dim and darken, Your death will arrive, dear warrior, to sweep you away. Just so I ruled the Ringdanes' country for 50 years, defended them in wartime with spear and sword against constant assaults by many tribes. I came to believe my enemies had faded from the face of the earth. Still, what happened was a hard reversal from bliss to grief. Grendel struck after lying in wait. He laid waste to the land, and from that moment my mind was in dread of his depredations. So I praise God in his heavenly glory that I lived to behold this head dripping blood, and that after such harrowing I can look upon it in triumph at last. Take your place then, with pride and pleasure, and move to the feast. Tomorrow morning our treasure will be shared and showered upon you. The Gede was elated and gladly obeyed the old man's bidding. He sat on the bench. And soon all was restored the same as before. Happiness came back, the hall was thronged, and a banquet set forth. Black night fell and covered them in darkness. That's where I'm going to stop. And what I'd like for you to do now is to go to the handout Hrothgar's lesson, and you will use those last several lines that I read where Hrothgar is speaking to Beowulf to determine what is it exactly that the advice that Hrothgar is giving to Beowulf. So you can work with a partner if you want. If you turn in the same document, please make sure both names are on it. But otherwise you can work on your own if you want. And we'll talk about it next class period. That's it for now.